Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. Before we begin, I'd just like to take a quick moment. If these videos help you relax, fall asleep, or simply enjoy a quieter evening, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It truly means a lot to us and helps keep the channel running and growing. For those of you who are new here, here's how our videos are structured. Each one starts with around an hour of storytelling, followed by an hour of soothing background music to help you rest, unwind, or create a peaceful atmosphere. We hope this format gives you a more relaxing and comfortable experience. Feel free to leave a comment with any thoughts or suggestions, and if you find it helpful, we'd be grateful if you shared it with friends or loved ones. Thank you so much for being here with us. Now, let's get into tonight's stories. I'm Anna, and my small family just moved to Columbus, Ohio, about 6 months ago. The 2-story house we bought is in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Everything was perfect for the first 3 months. I set up a cozy workspace in the downstairs den. Mike was settling in well at his new job, and Emma quickly made friends at school. We even got to know most of our neighbors, except for the man living in the house next door. Mike said he'd met him once, a retired chemistry professor named Daniel Lee. He lived alone and preferred his privacy. Then winter came, and with it, a strange feeling. In the afternoons, I started to feel tired. My mind was foggy, and I couldn't focus. Headaches appeared often, starting at my temples and spreading to the back of my head. At first, I figured it was just the lack of sunlight and my body adjusting to the colder weather. I wrote down my symptoms in a journal and tried to change my diet, exercise more, and even take vitamin D supplements, but it didn't seem to help. Then Emma started having morning sickness and trouble sleeping at night. "I think we should take Emma to the doctor," I told Mike. "I think you're just worrying too much, Sarah. We just went through a big move. Our bodies need time to adjust." Maybe Mike was right, but I was still going to keep an eye on everything. I started tracking the times we felt worst, the food we ate, even the weather. After a week, the results showed our symptoms seemed to get worse in the evenings and early mornings. One day, I felt my body suddenly and noticeably exhausted after a visit from our neighbor, Mr. Daniel. Mike thought he was pleasant, but I didn't. His eyes were too intense, his smile fake, and he always found reasons to come over more often. The situation became serious when Emma had a seizure at school. The results came back. Emma didn't have a fever, and all tests showed nothing unusual. We were sent home with advice to monitor her and come back if she had more seizures. After Emma fell asleep, I told Mike, "I think there's something in this house making us sick, and Mr. Lee is involved." Mike was surprised. "Daniel? He's very friendly. He has a chemistry degree and researches narcotics." I looked him up. "So what? That doesn't incriminate him. I've seen him lurking around the house when you're at work, and our symptoms get worse every time he comes over. You're being paranoid. Maybe you should see a therapist." I felt helpless and disappointed after talking to Mike. He insisted on defending a stranger instead of worrying about his wife and daughter. I ordered small surveillance cameras online, placing them on the porch, at the front door, and in the main ventilation room. I also bought an air testing kit and sent samples to a private lab. I started sleeping in Emma's room for her safety. One night, I heard a sound, a soft hiss, like gas escaping. I turned on the light and checked around, but saw nothing. The next morning, I checked the cameras. At 2 a.m., Daniel Lee approached our house, wearing a gas mask and carrying a small device. Then, he moved to Emma's window, but seemed to give up when he noticed the window was tightly closed. I felt nauseous and terrified. I was right. He was poisoning us, but why? I needed more concrete evidence before going to the police. I didn't tell Mike about the video or the samples until I had enough proof. The lab results came back a day later. According to the report, they found traces of methadone and hydrocodone in the air and drinking water samples. Small amounts, but enough to cause the symptoms we were experiencing with prolonged exposure. What should I do now? I couldn't confront Lee alone. I needed Mike to trust me. I waited until Emma was asleep, then sat down with Mike and showed him the video and the lab report. Mike stared at the screen, then at me. There was something in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? We need to call the police. Number not yet. We need more evidence. Mike, he's slowly killing us. I'll talk to Daniel tomorrow. There might be an explanation. Mike's answer confused me even more. Why would he want to talk to the person harming his family? Why not call the police immediately? A horrifying thought suddenly struck me, but I immediately dismissed it. No, Mike couldn't know about this. He couldn't be involved. That night, I couldn't sleep. I rewatched the camera footage again and again, and then I noticed what I had missed. On one of the old videos, there was a figure at the front door at midnight. Not Daniel Lee, but Mike. He was opening the door as if waiting for someone. I rummaged through Mike's phone when he went to the bathroom the next morning. I found messages between him and Daniel, messages talking about dosage, effects, and leaving no trace. And then I found the reason. When she's gone, I'll have everything, the insurance and freedom. Stick to the plan. Slowly, no one will suspect. I felt like my world collapsed. My husband was trying to kill me. I took screenshots of the messages, backed up the videos to a hard drive that I hid in my bag. I told Mike I was taking Emma to the doctor for further checks. Instead, I drove straight to the police station. They arrested Mike and Daniel that very day. A search of Daniel's house revealed a mini laboratory where he concocted drug mixtures. They found documents on methods of slow poisoning that leave no trace, and a large payment from Mike's secret account. Investigations showed Mike was having an affair and wanted to be free but didn't want to split assets or pay alimony. He met Daniel, a chemist who had been fired for unethical experiments, on an online forum. Together, they planned to slowly poison me, causing symptoms similar to a mental disorder and eventually leading to a seemingly natural death. Mike and Daniel were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and aggravated assault. I was granted a restraining order and took Emma away from Columbus to a small coastal town on the shores of Lake Erie, a place where we could start over. It's been 6 months since we left. Emma has recovered both physically and mentally. I'm still healing, still learning to trust again. I'm Ricky, 35, still single, and just trying to find some peace after everything life's thrown at me. My new place is on the edge of a quiet little town, tucked right up next to the forest. The vibe here is totally different from the packed, noisy spots I used to live in. The houses are spread out, mostly older folks living here, just looking for some peace in their golden years. The house is simple, but comfy, with a little backyard facing the woods and a dirt road that takes you into town. Across from my place is this old house with peeling paint and a wooden fence stacked with layers, making it look even older. The guy who owned it was this guy in his 50s named Gavin. Found that out when I said hi to the neighbors. I spotted Gavin a few times, not because I was nosy, just wanted to know when he was around so I could say hey. On the afternoon of day 3 after moving in, I swung by Gavin's place to say hi and share some cake. Gavin opened the door looking awkward, but he lit up real quick when I introduced myself and said hey. He invited me in, and while he sounded friendly, his voice had this weird shake to it. I walked in and noticed his place was pretty messy. The furniture was old, and it felt kind of stuffy with no natural light. I plopped down on the old sofa, and Gavin brought me a glass of orange juice. I smiled, grabbed it, took a sip, but then had to stop right away. There was a long, yellow hair floating in the drink. I tried to ignore the weirdness, set the glass down, and looked up at him. I asked him a bit about his life, and Gavin said he was also on his own, like the neighbors, and that he was fine with everything for now. As Gavin was talking, he turned away and suddenly blasted the music really loud, the high-pitched tune shaking the whole place. I couldn't hide my surprise, and Gavin busted out laughing, his face all red and puffed up. saying that was his way of chilling out. I started feeling disrespected, so I politely said bye and left. That was the one and only time I went to Gavin's place and talked to him. Every move Gavin made, every look in his eyes, just screamed weird eccentricity. Even though I tried not to judge, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't like any of the other older folks I'd met. One time when I was coming back from town, I walked by Gavin's place and saw a young girl standing at the window and waving at me. But the way she looked was off, way too excited for just a random encounter. I clearly remembered Gavin saying he lived alone, so maybe this was his daughter stopping by for a visit. I smiled back, telling myself not to overthink it, but I still had a weird feeling about the whole thing. Then one night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of stuff crashing, furniture being smashed, and kids crying loudly just left me feeling totally confused. I went to the window to check it out, and I guessed the noise was coming from Gavin's place. I didn't want to get involved in other people's family drama, but those sounds really made me uneasy. A few days later, I saw another girl at Gavin's place. She was by the window too, looking all rushed, waving at me way too eagerly, like she was trying to get my attention. I was pretty sure this wasn't the same girl I saw last time. The girl's eyes didn't look happy. Instead, she seemed worried and in a rush about something. The confusion in my mind just kept growing, but I kept telling myself I was probably overthinking it. Once again, I gave her a quick hello and then just took off. The third time, I saw a girl totally different from the other two, with shiny golden hair. She just stood there, waving her hand slowly, not saying a word. This time I couldn't calm down anymore, so I decided to go over and ask. But after I took a few steps, Gavin came out of the house, looked at me, and nodded his chin. I was gonna ask about the girls, but when I pointed to the window, she was gone. Who were these girls? Why did they keep showing up and disappearing? The questions kept swirling in my head, sticking with me day and night, making it hard to focus on anything else. I hit peak unease when I saw this skinny, pale girl with cuts on her arms standing in front of his house. Seeing that made it impossible for me to sit still. I decided to call the cops and tell them about all the weird stuff I'd seen. The police showed up pretty quickly. As they knocked on the guy's door, I stood at my window, heart pounding. At first, he answered the door all calm, but when the police asked to come in and check, he got all tense. The police searched the house, and what they found freaked both me and them out. Up on the second floor, they found 3 girls locked up. All 3 were chained up, their bodies really skinny, covered in old and new wounds. Those girls were the ones I'd seen through the window. What was even worse and totally disgusting was that the 3 girls were the victims of Gavin's kidnapping, keeping them locked up and abusing them for the past 10 years. The little girl was Gavin's daughter with the second girl he had kidnapped. I stood outside, frozen, watching the police take that bastard to the car. His face was no longer the cheerful or confused look like the first day we met. It was just cold, blank, and creepy. I went back home, but the images of those girls, their pleading eyes, and the creepy sounds from the night before kept popping up in my head. All 3 of them had called out to me, full of hope, joy, panic, and desperation. I can't stop thinking that if I hadn't called the police, they would have had to keep going through that pain for who knows how many more years. Based on a true case that once shocked the entire United States, this story tells of 3 young women who were illegally held captive for a decade by a man in a house in Cleveland, Ohio. The first victim was Michelle Knight, who was 21 years old at the time. A year later, 17-year-old high school student Amanda Berry went missing on her way home from work. The last was Gina DeJesus, who was only 14 when she lost contact with her family. For 10 long years, the 3 women lived under strict control, completely isolated from the outside world. Despite the unimaginable conditions, they never lost hope for freedom. That resilience was eventually rewarded when one of them found a chance to call for help from a neighbor, an act that led to their rescue. The case was soon brought to light, and the perpetrator received a harsh sentence, putting an end to a dark chapter in the victims' lives. Yet what is even more admirable is that these three women chose to move forward, rising above their past and becoming symbols of resilience and inspiration to millions around the world. I'm Ava, and I'm 16. It all started about 6 months after my family moved to this quiet neighborhood. My parents picked this place because it was known for being safe, having good schools, and a friendly community. Our next-door neighbor was Mrs. Allen, a middle-aged widow who seemed really polite. Her son, Joey, was my age. At first, Joey seemed like a normal kid, maybe a bit quiet and shy, but always polite when we bumped into each other. He usually wore big hoodies no matter the weather, and I rarely saw him with friends. My parents always said Joey was a good kid whenever they saw him helping his mom with yard work or carrying groceries inside. I can't say exactly when things started to get weird. Maybe it was the glances that lasted a little too long when we saw each other in the school parking lot. Joey always seemed to show up at the grocery store, the library, or the movie theater at the same time as me. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence in a small town. I started to notice how Joey would change his schedule to walk to school at the same time as me. He always sat close enough to overhear my conversations in the cafeteria. His bedroom window always seemed to have a light on. Sometimes, I just felt like someone was watching me. My mom gently brushed off my concerns, saying, "You're at that age where everyone notices you. There's no need to overthink it." But I still felt uneasy, and that feeling wouldn't go away, which made me pretty stressed out. One night, my parents went to a company party and were coming home late, so I was home alone. Rain started to fall outside, and the wind was pretty strong. Around midnight, I finished my essay and decided to go to bed. The house was strangely quiet. I was so tired that I fell asleep right away. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I woke up. At first, there was nothing but the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall and the sound of rain outside. But then, I realized another sound, a very faint breathing. I opened my eyes wide, held my breath, and listened. And it was coming from under my bed. My body froze. A cold dread spread through me, from the top of my head to my toes. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Someone was under my bed. My heart hammered, and my brain frantically searched for a plan. I decided the best option was to keep pretending to be asleep while I figured out what to do. Trying my best to keep my breathing even, I let one hand drop naturally off the side of the bed, as if I was just rolling over in my sleep. And then, my fingers touched human hair. All pretense vanished. I shot upright and leaped out of bed, unable to stop the scream that ripped from my throat. At the same moment, a dark figure emerged from under the bed. It was Joey. He stood there in his familiar black hoodie, his eyes wide. In his hand was a knife. Time seemed to stand still for a few long seconds as we stared at each other. I grabbed my bedside lamp and hurled it straight at Joey. It missed him, but it created enough of a distraction for me to bolt for the door. I heard Joey stumble behind me, probably tripping over something in the dark. I ran downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear hurried footsteps chasing me. At the front door, I fumbled with the deadbolt, my trembling hands making the simple task difficult. Finally, the door swung open, and I ran to the nearest house with lights on, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' place down the street. I banged on the door frantically, yelling my name and begging for help. The door opened, and Mr. Jenkins' confused face appeared. I quickly explained everything, and Mr. Jenkins immediately called the police. My parents rushed home from their party. Police searched Mrs. Allen's house, and then, even more horrifying things were discovered. Joey hadn't just been watching me from afar. He had snuck into my room multiple times for months. His room was a chilling shrine dedicated to me. Hundreds of photos of me doing all sorts of activities were plastered all over the walls. In a journal, police found detailed entries about what Joey called observation nights. Nights when he hid under my bed and simply watched me sleep. He described the feeling of touching my hair, wrote about my scent, the sounds I made while sleeping, and times he rummaged through my belongings when I left the room. But the most terrifying part, the one that made even the police officers shiver, Joey had explicitly written, "Tonight will be different. Ava will be mine forever. We will always be together in death." And he had brought the tools to carry out that plan. The knife I had seen, rope, duct tape, and a bottle of sleeping pills. During the interrogation, Joey confessed to all of it with a disturbing calmness. He said he had fallen in love with me the first day he saw me, that we belonged together, and if he couldn't have me, then no one could. He detailed how he broke into my house through a first-floor window I had forgotten to lock. More than a year after the incident, I still wake up every night, my heart pounding, imagining someone hiding under my bed. Joey is in a mental institution. My family moved to another city, but I know I'll never feel truly safe again.
I'm Oscar, 26 years old, living alone in New York. Because I have an online job and have free time, I often sleep during the day and then work at night. In recent months, a 7-Eleven convenience store opened near my house. I really enjoy being able to buy food at night while working. A man named David, 45 years old, is the owner of the store. David is recruiting staff and temporarily looks after this place. David designed a room at the back of the store to provide a comfortable place to rest. He was funny and kind. Sometime later, the store had another female employee. Her appearance is not very outstanding, but her way of talking attracted me. Her name is Mary, 26 years old, and she is Mr. David's niece. Gradually, I stopped by the convenience store several times a day to talk to Mary. I started to see that Mary had feelings for me. But David gradually became more grumpy every time he saw me. I guess David is upset because I'm affecting Mary's work. He met me privately and harshly asked me to stay away from Mary. David gave the reason that he did not want Mary to be in danger when getting acquainted with strangers. It's ironic that Mary is old enough to make her own decisions about her life. Of course, I didn't listen to David. Since that tense conversation, David continuously appeared at the store. It's like he's guarding Mary and I so we don't have a chance to come into contact. Many times I asked Mary out to have her own space. She happily accepted, but then always had a reason to refuse. One day I stayed up late to meet a deadline and felt hungry. I went to the convenience store. There was no one inside. I called out to David and he didn't answer. I walked around and then accidentally stopped at the door leading to the room at the back of the store. Just as I was about to approach the door, it suddenly opened loudly. Mary walked out looking haggard, her clothes disheveled. She smiled very awkwardly at me, raised her hand to close the door, not giving me a chance to look inside. I was extremely surprised to see Mary. This was not her shift. Looking at Mary's body, I still saw bruises. I asked worriedly, but she avoided my eyes and said she was fine. That night, I no longer had enough concentration and spirit to work. I always think about Mary and many questions pop up in my head. The following days, I did not see David appear again. Mary said that David had an accident and broke his leg so he would stay home and rest for a while. Supervising and operating that store will be in charge of Mary. She will stay at the store and use David's room. Mr. David also recruited an additional employee, a middle-aged woman named Joan. Mary and I became a couple not long after. Unlike other couples, our date spot is always a convenience store. Mary never let me or Miss Joan into the back room of the store. One time, I used the restroom at the store. After draining the water, I saw something floating back. It looked like meat and had a very unpleasant smell. I guess the pipe was clogged, This must be leftover food someone had flushed down. This condition lasted for several weeks afterward. Not only the toilet, the store's drain was also clogged. I wanted to handle this for Mary, but she said she would do it herself. It's been a while since David returned to the store. Mary also did not care much for her uncle. The next strange thing is that Miss Joan also disappeared after nearly a month of working here. That day, Mary and I were at the store when the police came to investigate Miss Joan's disappearance. Mary happily cooperated and said she had resigned from the store a week before the missing information was reported. One time I went to the store looking for Mary but couldn't find her. I couldn't hold back my curiosity anymore, so I decided to enter the room at the back of the store to find her. The space inside is very stuffy and dark. I smelled clearly the smell of disinfectant and cleaning fluid. There was something in the corner of the room. I approached it and saw it was a chainsaw. Do convenience stores also use this? "What are you doing here?" Mary shouted loudly, startling me. She stood in the doorway, staring at me and full of anger. Before I could react, Mary immediately kicked me out and slammed the door. I returned home with all kinds of surprised and helpless emotions inside me. The next day, the convenience store closed. I also completely lost contact with Mary. About a week passed. I was worried and couldn't do anything. I decided to report to the police and then received a call from the police. They asked me to come to the station to cooperate in the investigation of the murder of 2 people. Strange things happened all at once. I fell into extreme confusion. The police questioned me about my connection to the woman named Mary. I replied, "She is my girlfriend." Police said she is missing and is the prime suspect for the murder. The first victim is David, who she claims is her uncle, who is actually her lover. Currently, the police have only found Mr. David's head and hands hidden in the room behind the store. They are still looking for other parts of the body. The next victim was Miss Joan. The police found her body in the same room, wrapped neatly in a very large bag with her limbs severed. Police suspect that the chainsaw in the room was the tool she used to perform the dismemberment process. I was shocked to hear the information from the police. I remembered all of Mary's strange expressions over the past time. Her carefree appearance that night. Maybe she just did something bad to Mr. David. What I saw in the toilet was most likely his flesh. Miss Jones is also likely to be murdered when she learns the horrifying truth about Mr. David. Police are still actively searching for Mary. I feel scared and disgusted that I have loved the devil all this time.
I'm Adam, 36, living in a pretty chill city. My life was all about office work, chill evenings with a beer and some movies, nothing fancy. But then, everything flipped overnight. I can still remember the freezing air, the wind whipping through every corner of the street, making everything feel gloomy and blurry. I was driving home after a long day at work. The car clock was pushing midnight, and all I wanted was to get home, take a shower, and crash. Out of nowhere, while driving down this empty street, I saw a woman on the side of the road, waving like she needed help. She was drenched from the rain. Her hands were freezing, like she'd been standing there for ages. I slowed down and pulled over. I felt bad for her. I couldn't just ignore a woman who obviously needed help. When the car stopped, she came over, struggling to walk in the rain, her eyes looking at me all sad. In the dim light from the sign, I could see her face better, maybe in her 30s. Her skin was pale, her eyes looked tired, and her long hair was all wet, sticking to her forehead, all wrinkled from the rain. She was wearing an old, thick coat, wrapped tightly around her skinny body, her hands still shaking as she pressed against the car window. I quickly opened the car door and rolled down the window a bit, telling her to hop in fast. She said thanks in a tired voice and sat in the passenger seat. She didn't answer any of my questions, just nodded a little, her eyes glued to the window the whole time. I asked for her address, but she just told me to keep going straight. After a bit, I stopped at a gas station to grab some gas and water, and before I left, I asked if she wanted a cup of tea or something warm. She kept staring out the window and didn't answer, like she was too tired to say anything. I finished pumping gas, grabbed a bottle of water, and even got a cup of hot cocoa, then turned around. But when I opened the car door and looked inside, she was gone. There was a small puddle of water on the seat, like she had just gotten up and left. At the time, I didn't think anything was too weird. I just thought the rain had stopped and she didn't need to keep riding with me. I got back in the car, started it up, and drove home. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and wide awake. I grabbed the keys and headed to the garage to go to the store and grab food for the week. As soon as I sat in the driver's seat and bent down to buckle my seatbelt, my body suddenly felt all stiff and out of it. I slowly turned to look at the back seat, my heart racing, and a wave of fear hit me right away. At the spot where the woman had sat last night, there was no puddle of water as I thought, but a pool of dried blood. The dark red had started to dry and stick to the seat, making a creepy stain. I sat there, eyes wide, my mind racing. How could this be? I clearly remembered that nothing weird happened in the car last night. No strange noises, no odd behavior from her. I was so confused, not sure if she was hurt or not, but with how big the stain was, the wound had to be pretty bad. I went back inside and decided to have breakfast first. I mean, I did a good deed, and if the girl left without saying anything, that was on her. I decided I'd have breakfast first, then go clean the car. While I was eating breakfast, I turned on the TV, and then the sandwich got stuck in my throat when I heard the news. In breaking news, Marlene Nelson, the woman who has been missing for a month, was spotted for the first time last night. Highway camera footage shows what appears to be Marlene getting into a black Toyota Camry. Authorities are currently working to identify the owner of the vehicle as part of their ongoing investigation. I called the police right away, and they were at my house 15 minutes later. They asked about the woman from last night and wanted me to confirm if it was Marlene Nelson. I confirmed it was her. I could still clearly remember her face. The police said the highway security cam caught her getting into my car. After that, Marlene Nelson didn't show up on any of the cameras again, like she just vanished. My eyes went wide. I couldn't believe what was going on. After I told them about the blood in the car this morning, the police asked to search it. I agreed right away. No reason to hide anything. I hadn't done anything wrong. Still, the anxiety and tension inside me wouldn't go away. It felt like I was getting caught up in some weird situation I couldn't explain. The police started taking blood samples from the passenger seat to test. When a police opened the trunk, I didn't dare look inside right away. But then, he froze, and the whole place went silent, with only the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. He bent down to take a look, then stared up at me with a horrified look on his face. Suddenly, I got a chill down my spine. I took slow steps toward the trunk. My legs felt like they were gonna give out, but I couldn't stop. I bent down and looked inside, and what I saw was unbelievable. The body of the woman from last night, the girl I'd given a ride to, was lying there quietly with no signs of resistance, like she'd been lying there, just waiting quietly for a long time. Her hair, still wet, was as matted as it was last night, but now the bloodstains on her pale skin made my throat tighten. I looked up at the police, but they didn't say anything, just stared at me with silence and suspicion. Questions kept racing through my head, but I couldn't answer any of them. My life totally changed from that moment on. My work relationships started to fall apart. My coworkers got distant, avoiding me like I was some kind of threat. I wasn't the Adam they knew anymore, just a suspect in some weird case. Outside of work, my personal relationships took a huge hit too. My friends slowly started pulling away from me. They didn't say anything, but I could feel the change in their eyes, in the way they talked to me. It was honestly a really painful feeling. And then, for the next week, I mostly worked with the police, answering questions and giving them all the info they needed. Each time, I felt like I was the one on trial, even though I didn't have anything to hide. The tension, exhaustion, and fear felt like this storm that just wouldn't let up, making it impossible for me to chill or feel any peace. Every day I woke up felt like a fight with myself, full of questions I couldn't answer. In the end, the police said I was innocent. The forensic team found a bunch of stimulants in Marlene's system, and her injuries were probably from her losing control. They didn't find any trace of me on her, or any signs of a fight or attack. Part of me felt relieved, but the rest of me still felt empty, like I couldn't shake the fear. I sold my car, moved to a whole new city where nobody knew me, and started over. I never thought being kind would end up turning my life upside down. I am David, 28 years old. I was born into a wealthy family, where everything seemed to be within reach: money, fame, and even women. I never had to chase after anyone. They always came to me. My relationships never lasted more than a month. I'm not a bad person. I just never met anyone special enough to keep in my life. Until I met Maya. She wasn't extraordinary. From her edited appearance, it wasn't hard for me to tell that, and her way of speaking was quite ordinary as well. One strange thing about her face: her eyes, a mix of gray and blue, blended in a way that was hard to understand, making it impossible for me to look away. What's more, the way she rejected every attempt I made to approach her. Maya was different. It was as if she knew everything about me, from my hobbies and habits to the stories I had never told anyone. Whenever I asked why, she would just smile and say it was a lucky guess. Instead of feeling disturbed, I was drawn in. She was the only one who wasn't easily within my control. She was like a maze. The more I tried to find an exit, the deeper I got lost. That Valentine's Day, I managed to get a date with Maya. For the first time in my life, I was truly serious about a relationship. I wanted Maya to know that I had changed because of her. I don't know when exactly I started to fall in love with her. This love goes beyond the desire to conquer. It was like a kind of magic, an invisible force that I couldn't resist. Maya was the only thing I thought about every day, and I decided that I had to have her. The restaurant was booked a week in advance, a luxurious, cozy place with soft golden lighting. Our table was in a quiet corner, with a large bouquet of roses and 2 glasses of wine on it. Maya arrived, still with her usual gentle demeanor. The long black dress hugged her body, her soft hair cascading down her shoulders, and her lips were lightly tinted with a wine-red color. Throughout the dinner, we talked and laughed together. I felt happier and more at ease than ever before. When the dessert was brought to the table, I nervously looked at Maya. On the white porcelain plate, the words were written in bold chocolate: "Will you be my girlfriend?" She saw it without showing any surprise. Maya smiled, her eyes full of meaning. Maya opened her handbag, took out a small blue gift box, and pushed it toward me. I held the gift, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. When I opened it, inside was a stack of photos tied together with a red ribbon. The first photo was of Maya, radiant and beautiful. But the following photos made me freeze. They were photos documenting her plastic surgery process. The photos were arranged in reverse chronological order, each step, each process being revealed. Layer by layer, her face transformed, revealing a terrifying truth. In the last photo, I was speechless. It was Maggie, a shy girl who had stood in front of me at university, holding a love letter. I remember that day very clearly. Maggie with her frizzy hair, wearing messy clothes, and her awkward posture. I had laughed at her innocence, even teasing her loudly in front of the crowd. Have you ever looked at yourself with those strange, dull gray eyes? My heart felt like it was being squeezed by someone. I didn't know whether to call her Maya or Maggie anymore. Her gaze no longer held that gentle look. It was a cold, calculating look. Maya continued by placing another gift box down, larger than the one with the photos. It was carefully wrapped in glossy red paper with a golden ribbon tied on top. I stared at the box. All my senses were screaming that something was wrong, but my hands felt compelled to open it. My heart pounded as I untied the ribbon. Beneath the wrapping paper was a heavy, solid wooden box. I slowly lifted the lid of the box, and a strong chemical smell immediately wafted up, causing me to instinctively step back. As I looked inside, I felt like all the air in my lungs was being drained. Inside the box was an eye, preserved in a jar of chemical solution, still intact with an unusual gray color. A small piece of paper lay at the bottom of the box, with scrawled writing in red ink. This is one of the things Maggie had to sacrifice to become the person you love. Not stopping there, Maya reached for the fake blue eye and placed it on the table. I felt frozen. Everything around me seemed to stop, leaving only me and the horrifying image in front of me. Her right eye socket was empty, dark and deep, like an endless abyss, pulling all the light and reason from me into it. A wave of intense nausea surged in my throat, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene before me. My head buzzed, fragmented memories of Maggie flooding back, each image pushing me deeper into a panic. My whole body trembled, my limbs cold as ice. Before, I had never considered the pain or effort someone must endure to change themselves. But now, in the most ruthless way, Maya had forced me to face it. A chilling sensation washed over me as I thought about this. Every part of Maggie's body, altered, replaced to create a perfect version that I had been captivated by. And now, she was gifting me a piece of the truth, the most haunting gift I had ever received. I left the restaurant, but the sense of horror didn't fade in the slightest. The eerie, triumphant laugh of Maya echoed behind me. Since that day, I have been haunted by the gray eyes, always watching me no matter where I go. Perhaps that is exactly what Maggie wanted. Not a bloody revenge, but a reminder that I could never forget her and the pain I had caused. And that was the price I had to pay.
My name's Karen, and I'm a senior studying sociology. After school, I usually babysit to help cover my living expenses. Mary, a single mom, hired me and paid pretty well. Her place is a cozy 2-story house out in the Boston suburbs. Inside, it's got that warm, homey vibe, family pictures on the walls, little toys scattered all over the living room, and a faint smell of oak from the fireplace. Ellie, 5 years old with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, was zipping around the room, her giggles making the freezing winter outside feel far away. At 10, I told Ellie a bedtime story before she drifted off. Her mom, Mary, got home right on time, like always. She gave me a kind smile, said thanks, and waved as I headed out. Back at my apartment, I suddenly realized I had left my textbook on Mary's couch. With a big paper due soon, I couldn't just leave it behind, so I decided to go back, even though it was already pretty late. The street looked totally different at that moment. It was dead quiet. The streetlights flickered on and off, and the tree shadows swayed in the dim glow, making everything feel even creepier. I stopped in front of the Parkers' house. The lights were off inside, except for a faint glow from a nightlight upstairs. As soon as I stepped in, I knew something was off. The air felt colder than usual, heavy and still, so quiet I could hear my own footsteps on the wooden floor. Near the door, melted snow and muddy footprints were smeared across the carpet, probably from Mary's boots. Just as I turned around with my book in hand, I caught a glimpse of a figure moving past the second-floor window. My heart started racing, my fingers tightening around the book like it could somehow protect me. Back in the car, my phone lit up with a call from Mary's number. Her voice was shaky and weak.
Karen, are you still here?
I quickly told her I'd just come back to grab my book.
You shouldn't have come in.
The line suddenly cut out. Mary's voice was barely a whisper before the call dropped. I sat frozen in the car, my stomach twisting with worry for Ellie. I decided to call the police. While waiting for them to show up, I stepped out scanning the windows. Footprints in the snow led straight from the backyard to Ellie's window. The police got there fast, moving in toward the house. Through the dim glow from Ellie's room, I could see him, a tall guy holding a rifle, creeping from corner to corner. Mary was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged. Ellie sat on her mom's lap, her face red and puffy from crying, tiny hands clinging to Mary's neck. I had to look away when I saw their terrified eyes. The police surrounded the house. A SWAT team geared up and moved toward the back door, while the team leader got on a loudspeaker, stalling for time. The guy inside didn't waste any time. He shouted his demands: car, cash, a clean getaway. If they didn't give him what he wanted, he'd start with Ellie first. I gasped, my mind spinning. My heart nearly stopped when I saw him yank Ellie away from Mary, the gun aimed right at her. Inside, Mary was signaling with her hands. The guy wasn't paying attention then. Out of nowhere, Mary launched herself forward, shoving the chair at him. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to throw him off balance. He spun around, gun now pointed straight at Mary. A loud bang, a flash of light. Mary's scream cut through the night, sending a chill through everyone. I shouted in the patrol car, "They need help. Please, do something." Then all hell broke loose. The SWAT team stormed in, smashing through the ground floor window, bursting through the back door, tossing flashbang into the living room. Gunshots rang out, screams, Ellie's wails cutting through the chaos. The guy stumbled through the smoke, clutching Ellie tight, yanking her in front of him like a human shield. He was yelling non-stop, gunfire erupting wildly, bullets flying in every direction. Then a bullet hit his hand. His grip loosened. The gun clattered to the floor. An officer rushed in, tackled him to the ground, and cuffed him while another officer carried Ellie out. I ran over, nearly tripping as I grabbed Ellie and pulled her into my arms. She was sobbing, her little cries cutting through the silence now that everything was over. At the police station, I sat next to Mary while they patched her up before taking her to the hospital. Ellie wouldn't let go of me, clinging to my arm, still crying. The guy didn't look scared at all. If anything, his expression sent a chill down my spine. He smirked, eyes full of mockery as he stared at Mary and her mom through the glass partition. After hours of questioning and investigation, the truth finally came out. Turns out, he used to work for the company that maintained the Parkers family security system. He'd been watching them for months. That wasn't his first time pulling off a robbery like this. He even admitted he regretted not being more careful, said he should have taken me too. Mary's call was him forcing her to stage a fake scene, hoping it'd keep her and Ellie safe. A chill ran down my spine when I realized just how close I'd been to pure evil. What if I hadn't come back that night? Mary had to have surgery and would need weeks to recover. I stayed at the Parkers' house to help take care of Ellie, but things weren't the same anymore. Ellie jumped at every loud noise. Every night she needed me or Mary beside her just to fall asleep. I couldn't shake the memories either. Mary getting shot, Ellie's cries, The cold, empty look in that guy's eyes, it all kept replaying in my head. I tried to push it away, but some nights, I'd jolt awake from nightmares. One day, as light snow started falling, I stood by the window, watching the flakes drift down. Ellie came over and tugged my hand. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, really smiled. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. But I knew the truth. Neither of us would ever forget that night. It was a reminder that even in the safest places, danger can be lurking. And sometimes, it's the tiniest gut feelings that end up saving the things that matter most.
My name is Adam Martinez. I have been a school bus driver for 14 years. I'm 44 and live with my wife. Our only son is studying abroad in France. I love my job. The kids' smiles, their innocent eyes, and their curious questions make it all worth it. I set aside a little bit of my salary to buy school supplies, even though my pay isn't that high. Rulers, pencils, crayons, notebooks, and so on. I'll give the kids those gifts on the first day of the new school year. Or, in case of kids enrolling late, I'll use them as gifts to motivate them to study. One day, I got word from the school that they were getting a new kid named Jason, who's 10 years old. According to the homeroom teacher, Miss Karen Taylor, Jason has a pretty unique family situation. I put together a set of paints in a school bag, just the basic, affordable kind. I'd let Jason pick which he liked for the two gifts. I hoped Jason would adjust to the new environment quickly. I stopped the bus in front of Jason's house, which was the last pickup point before I took the kids to school. The small house looked pretty run down and was still a bit messy with leaves on the porch. Jason's family probably hadn't had a chance to clean it all up yet. After about 5 minutes of waiting, the house was still quiet and Jason didn't come out. The other kids on the bus started to get noisy. "Mr. Martinez, we're going to be late for school." Maddie, an 8-year-old girl who's pretty sharp, reminded me. I told the kids to quiet down and drove away. So Jason didn't make it to school on the first day. I let Karen, the homeroom teacher, know. For some reason, I felt like I should keep an extra eye on this boy Jason. Even though I'm not a teacher, I know I'm still part of the education system. The next day, I picked up Jason. He was a skinny boy, much smaller than you'd expect for his age, sitting in front of his house waiting for the bus. Jason looked back at the house, waved goodbye, and then ran toward the bus. The boy stood at the bus door, looking shy and hesitant before getting on. His clothes were messy, with stains that distorted the bear's face printed on them. The clothes didn't even fit him. They were too short. Immediately, I noticed a pretty unpleasant smell. I wasn't sure where it was coming from, but everything had been normal before Jason arrived. "Hey Jason, welcome to your new school. I'm Adam Martinez." I smiled at him and tried not to let the unpleasant smell affect my expression. "Didn't you take a shower before coming to school?" Maddie, the little girl, said in a choked voice, her hands covering her nose and her eyes showing annoyance. The other kids shouted the same as Maddie. I reminded everyone to keep it down and handed the two gifts I had prepared to Jason. "Pick the one you like." Jason lowered his head, shook it, and walked straight to the back of the bus. That was really heartbreaking to see. Karen and I talked about the boy again. She said she'd find a way to remind Jason about personal hygiene. In the afternoon, after school ended, Jason was still sitting quietly in the back row, staring out the window with a sad look. I'm not sure if he heard his friends' comments or if he was just trying to ignore them. The next day, Jason showed up at school in the same clothes as the day before, and that unpleasant smell was still there. I felt really sorry, but I have to say it smelled like a decaying animal carcass. "Yesterday the teacher reminded you to stay clean. I tried to keep my cool despite the hurtful comments from some of the kids. Jason stayed in the same spot and stayed quiet. After school in the afternoon, I parked in front of Jason's house and waited for a while. The house looked gloomy and dark. It didn't seem like a great place for raising a child. At the window, a woman stood there looking at me. I rolled down the car window, waved, and nodded to her. I guess she was Jason's mother. She didn't react, just popped something bright red into her mouth and started chewing. I felt a bit creeped out and decided to drive away. I kept glancing at the house in the rearview mirror, really wanting to find out more about Jason. The next day was the weekend, so I drove over to Jason's house with a school bag, some pencils, and 2 new sets of clothes. I knocked on the door, and on the 3rd try, it opened. The woman from yesterday was standing there with a really resentful and unpleasant expression. Her hands and the corners of her mouth were a light red, almost like dried blood. "Hello, I'm Jason's school bus driver." The woman's expression didn't change. I glanced inside the house after catching a strong, fishy smell. The furniture was all messed up, and there was something on the floor I couldn't quite make out. The woman suddenly slammed the door, and I was so surprised I didn't know how to react. I left the backpack with the pencils and clothes inside and walked away. The next Monday morning, I picked Jason up and saw he was wearing the clothes I gave him, and they fit perfectly. Jason looked a lot fresher, but as soon as he got into the car, the stench was still there, and even worse. "Are you still not showering before school?" The kids were really upset, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. Karen and I decided to visit his house that evening. While she knocked on the main door, I walked around to take a look. Through the window, I was stunned to see Jason with his face and new clothes covered in blood and his arms covered in deep scratches. Jason stared at a hidden corner I couldn't see, looking vacant and exhausted. The slurping sound was like some poor little animal was being ripped apart. When Jason saw me through the window, he looked really panicked and quickly ran toward the hidden corner. Immediately told Miss Karen to call the police, while I kept banging on the door and calling out to Jason. The police showed up and quickly broke the door lock. The scene inside the house was so disturbing that it made everyone who saw it shudder. Karen vomited and collapsed. Scattered around the house were torn toads, frogs, chickens, and other small parts like nails, feet, and so on. Jason stood with his arms outstretched in front of him, while a woman was munching on a toad in the corner. The police quickly restrained her, and Jason rushed over to hug the woman tightly, begging everyone not to hurt his mother. That was Jason's mother. She was on drugs and had gone insane. Jason and his mother's life had been extremely miserable with a cruel husband and father. The mother and son moved here with the help of an acquaintance. Because of a life filled with unhappiness and pain, Jason's mother couldn't stay strong and did drugs. Jason wasn't taken care of properly. His body was covered with countless sores and infections. That's why his body always had an unpleasant smell. After everything was sorted out at the police station, Karen burst into tears and hugged Jason. She temporarily adopted Jason, while his mother was taken care of and treated at the local hospital. I also became more of a friend and companion to Jason, giving him extra love and care. I hope all children in the world get the love and care they need.
I'm Oliver, 23 years old, just graduated from UC Berkeley, California, major in psychology. After a hard-working session, I plan to get some time off for myself, spending it with family, friends, before going to grind out later in work and labor. One day when I was doing web surfing, I came across a job that had the title Guardian of Sleep. That was really intriguing, so I dug deeper. The job was pretty simple according to the brochure. All you gotta do was to call the customers and literally guard their sleep. The customers would pay the guardians by the sessions. The fees were up to their negotiation. It was kind of like a nice job. No need to spend much on travel expenses. All you got to do was to stay, literally, guarding the other's sleep, plus also able to study your customers' psychology on the field. Awesome! I immediately contacted the organization, signing up for the job as guardian of sleep. They added me into the list. All I got to do was to leave my contact information. The customers would then make the contact soon. Maybe graduating in psychology was truly a bonus, because I soon received some early customers. It was kinda easy as it should, once I passed the assigned time and pricing. It did mess up my schedule a little bit, working in graveyard shift. So I would spend my daytime sleeping and resting, spending the nighttime for guardian work. Most of my customers were the elderly, living alone. They often have what I deemed loneliness syndrome, that affecting their sleep. Especially when you add in the amount of urination those elderly had to do, you get the point I'm talking about. A few weeks in, the work ran pretty smooth. I had built a personal network of acquaintances myself. I got quite a lot of money for someone who just graduated. At the time, I was compiling a sleep study based on my customers' sleeping patterns. That evening, when it's close to midnight, I received a text from a strange number. That person requested my assistance in their sleep guardian now. Since I had an empty schedule on that date, I immediately agreed. And then that number, after some time, FaceTime called me. In front of me was a young woman. She's crying hard and seemed to be in great distress. Took me a few seconds to settle, where I greeted her politely. The young woman was still crying for a while after that. I had to stay silent until she calmed down completely, which took about 20 minutes. The young woman introduced herself as Sophie. Due to protocol, I wasn't allowed to ask any further information, as well as the reasons for her distress. My job was only guarding her sleep, so I talked a bit to make her feel better. After some time, Sophie laid down on her bed, covered herself in the blanket, and said nothing else. She just kept her eyes opened, fixated to the ceiling all night long. At 7 a.m., I announced that my shift had ended, saying farewell to Sophie and prepared to leave. Still fixed on the lying position, she opened up to me, still in a monotonous voice. I want to schedule a long-term deal with you, to guard my sleep every night. The proposal took me by surprise, yet I agreed after a short while to consider. After all, the deal was still good, since I would have the psychological profile of a new, peculiar young candidate. Even though I was intrigued by Sophie's actions, however, I respected the privacy protection terms, and therefore would not discuss any further. That evening, Sophie called me very early, at around 8 p.m. She said she needed someone to talk to. She was afraid of the emptiness and darkness of the household. Taking a look at Sophie's bedroom, I guess she was pretty financially stable, so I asked her information about her age to give out the best advices for the quality of sleep. Yet she deflected the questions away, instead focusing on other topics. Once again, at 12 o'clock sharp, she lay down on the mattress and again slept with her eyes open. It occurred days after days where she would remain fixed on one position until daybreak. Her calls to me went earlier and earlier as the days went by. Sometimes I received her call right at sunset. I'll pay you more. Just watch me from sunset to sunrise. And keep an eye on me at all time, please. Not 1 second. I felt her mental state deteriorated day after days. One evening, I was dead tired since I was too busy to sleep in the daytime. At around 11 p.m., I began yawning constantly, with the fatigue set in quickly and heavily. At midnight, when Sophie went to sleep, the silence, combined with the sleep deprivation, finally knocked me out completely. I didn't know for how long had I been sleeping. I just knew that this sleep was the best one I had in a long time, enough for me to detach myself completely from reality. Until a sudden noise jolted me up from sleep. It came from my still opening iPad. After a minute of scrambling, I suddenly realized that I still needed to watch over Sophie. I quickly grabbed the iPad, which was showing the scene of her bedroom ceiling. It looked like her mobile device had been impacted sometime when I fell asleep. I was hesitant to tell her my apology for falling asleep. I was afraid I might disrupt her quiet environment. A few seconds later, it looked like Sophie's phone went back to being steady again. However, instead of Sophie, it was a person dressed in black. His face was concealed underneath a face sticker mask. However, his build was definitely a man. After a few seconds, I greeted him, but he didn't seem to respond. I asked whether he knew Sophie and what he was doing there in her room. The man remained silent, yet the sticker face seemed to have some shift in its wrinkles, and I was sure he was smirking. Sophie's hand suddenly appeared on the screen, waving at me. I guess that meant she told me that everything's okay. That man must have been someone she knew, and it seemed they were having some fun. However, Sophie's hand rose up further, and the man's hand holding it was soaked red with blood. No, to be exact, Sophie's severed hand that completely been detached from her arms. What the hell was going on? I asked myself frantically, not sure what I was witnessing and whether it was all of a prank or something that was happening for real. The man raised his hand, and another of Sophie's severed hand went up, waving at me. My heart beat up like crazy while I was paralyzed at the scene. That man seemed to be very excited at my expulsion. His bloodied hands meant something very, very terrible just happened with Sophia, and that very hand seemed to pull the camera down to the floor. I couldn't blink, my eyes glued toward his every movement. A stream of blood oozed down from his hand over the camera, smearing the screen in a blood-red filter. Sophie's black hair rose up on the screen, slowly revealing her bloodied face. She had both her eyes closed, and there was a lot of blood flowing from her neck down to her cheeks from the upside-down position. The man stopped at the almost severed neck of my client, then laughed aloud ecstatically. I shivered at the sight. What I witnessed there was so fucking surreal that it wasn't an impulsive act of anger in a robbery gone wrong. No, it seemed like a work of the devil. FaceTime connection suddenly went blank, snapped me from the trance I was at. Frantically dialed 911. I told the police about the murder scene I had witnessed. But when pressed further from the police, I knew only that the victim name was Sophie. Since the calls came from untraceable number, I couldn't recontact her again. Months of work with the police investigation, and we couldn't figure out where or even who Sophie was. The incident left me with a severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had to undergo psychiatric treatments. I couldn't bring myself to use any type of mobile devices with video features for almost 2 years. I had witnessed a serious murder right there at the screen. But the thing was, there wasn't any trace of Sophie or any reports nationwide, and we didn't even know who Sophie was at all. To that day, I sometimes wondering about the things that happened, on whether it was real or all just a dream. Whether that device from Sophie would ever contact me once again. you. Mm-hmm.